I want to talk about this clip because it so perfectly demonstrates to me what it takes to tell a story as a stand-up comedian. There is a lot to learn from Schlesinger here. Let's take it apart. Now watch the clip first so you can appreciate it without the analysis, then come back. It's not easy to learn to write jokes, nor is it easy to learn to tell a story. This is a big problem for new writers because they often attempt a storytelling style comedy right out of the gate. It makes perfect sense. I love my favorite comedians. They tell stories. I want to do the same thing. But storytelling and joke writing are both separately the work of a lifetime. It's a big ask for a new writer to try to learn how to do either. Now, mind you, you can do it. It's just that trying to learn both at the same time is too much. I worry that you'll get frustrated and give up. If you're just starting out, in my opinion, you are much better served to write concise jokes and then build your set by stringing those working jokes together. You'll get more laughs and have more fun. Later, you'll be able to weave jokes into stories. Now, this material is nearly 10 years old. It has since been made into a movie, but we're just talking about it as filmed here. First of all, I like that Schlesinger is wearing all black. I think it's a choice that says, I want to be judged on my material alone. A lot of people say, no, you should wear loud clothes so that you stand out. If you ask me, you should rely on your material for that, but you make your own choice. I'm going to be referring to 3-act storytelling a lot, which is confusing because it has 5 parts. Act 1, the inciting incident. Act 2, the big showdown. Act 3. You can use your own terms for each of these parts. And if you do, people will think you made the whole system up. Dan Harmon did that to Joseph Campbell. Regardless, in order to serve story, we need to hear what life is like before the story really begins. That's what Act 1 is all about. And in order to serve comedy, we also need to hear jokes. Eliza navigates all of this well. Here's our first joke.
I have a rule, and that is never talk to the person sitting next to you on an airplane. This rule instated after I shared a lovely hour-long flight to San Jose with a woman who just pretty much spent the whole time telling me why Jews are the source of all the problems in the world. So,
you can see here this is a relatively long setup. This is what I mean about trying to tell a story as a stand-up. You need so much information to make the story work. To use a cereal metaphor, it necessarily makes your Raisin Bran more brand than cereal.
So I never talked to people sitting next to me. And I was flying home about a year ago, and a boy sat next to me. He was about my age, clean cut. He started chatting, and he seemed normal, so I asked him about himself. I'm like, tell me about yourself. He's like, well, my name is Brian. I work at a hedge fund. I went to Yale. I was like, okay, nerd alert.
This one's an even longer setup. And note that we're seeing basically no tags here. We gotta get through all of this exposition in order for the rest of the story to make sense. There's no time for tags. Here's a slightly shorter joke to help.
He was like, tell me about yourself. I was like, my name's Eliza. I'm a stand-up comedian, and I struggle with being attractive yet accessible.
Next up, we get an even longer setup. Again, we need all this stuff because we need to understand that Eliza liked this guy as a person. We need it because we need to understand what happens later in the story. And we need it so some more shallow jokes can work without her seeming too mean. But also we need it because it's all Act 1 of the greater story.
So over the next couple weeks, we kind of became friends. We stayed in touch, we'd hang out a lot, and I liked him. I liked his personality. He was a hard worker, Irish-American, hard worker, smart. And it became clear that he had a crush on me. He would always try to buy me drinks, always buy things to impress me. He bought a house at one point, not for me, but he bought one. I never went over because I didn't want to, see him with his shirt off because I could tell that his body was unacceptable.
Big story point coming up. Not only are we about to hear one of, if not the best jokes in the clip, we're about to make the turn from Act 1 to Act 2 via the inciting incident. Now, painters often talk about how the most impactful part of your painting should be where the darkest darks and the lightest lights come together, and this moment reminds me of that idea.
And I think it bothered him that I didn't have a crush on him, and I was like, let me explain it to you. I am a 7 without makeup, and you are a 4 with money. Those are the numbers, crunch them as you will.
May we all someday deliver a moment this good. Eliza knows it's going to be good, so she uses a couple of tags here, even though we've been mostly tag-free. Otherwise, she'd have to stand there silent while the crowd laughs and claps, which could kill the mood. Better to tag it and keep the laugh going. So that was our lightest light. Now the inciting incident, the darkest dark, and the turn to Act 2. Now, personally, I think anything that's neither punch nor tag should be marked as setup, but this is mostly all story stuff. Not sure it even counts as setup.
So one day he called me and he was like, we can't hang out today. And we dated for about a week and things were great. And then things got weird.
Watch this clip again and take note here that at the words chemical imbalance, the crowd wants to laugh, but Eliza keeps moving. We're not sure whether she wasn't expecting a laugh or she's just trying to get through this section because she knows it's a lot of story stuff without a laugh.
You want to cry? I'm crying right now. That's a weird chemical imbalance, but I feel bad for you. I just wanted to be there for him. And over the next couple of weeks.
All right, story note here. This part of the structure is called the inciting incident, but note that there are really a couple of incidents here. Your story might have this many as well. Now, storytelling framework is important, but you shouldn't get too hung up thinking that Act 1 should be a certain length or your inciting incident should be a single sentence. In Act 2, Eliza has a boyfriend and her life with that boyfriend is what escalates, but all the stuff about him saying that his mom had cancer, all the way to Eliza's explanation of her emotional state, to them beginning to date, to me, is all inciting incident. I say this because if you're trying to follow a storytelling framework that wants your inciting incident to be a single sentence, all this would be hard to reduce. So don't be too hard on yourself. In this case, Act 1 is about 1.5 minutes, Act 2 is 3.5 minutes, and Act 3 is about 1 minute. So as I say, here we are in Act 2, aka writer party time. Act 2 is the story you wanted to tell in the first place. It's the reason you're telling this story at all. Also of note, in this section, we are back to a more expected punchline regularity. A lot of these punches are added to the story via asides, as is the one about Eliza's mom's voice.
My mom called me one day. Eliza, I Googled your boyfriend. Incidentally, my mother is Selma from The Simpsons.
Now that we're out of Act 1 and our inciting incident is behind us, we have a little wiggle room to stray from the story to work these in. I love this one.
I go up to the window and I look in, looking for context clues, looking for some things of his, Yale context clues, right? Plaid, mallards, pennants, minorities chained to a window, something.
From there's a lot of story stuff. We are winding up Act 2. We know that we're in Act 3 when Eliza literally says the words, and that's when it all comes crashing down.
And that's when it all came crashing down.
A very interesting moment after she relates the big confession where her boyfriend admits he was lying about his mom having cancer. Eliza says,
right? You've never been more annoyed that someone doesn't have cancer.
This is just an aside, but the crowd responds so well, I think it surprised her. She's already a few words into wrapping up the whole story, but the crowd wants to laugh. So, being a pro, she stops and lets them.
Right? You've never been more annoyed that someone doesn't have cancer. So for the last 6 or 7...
She doesn't try to say a tag off the top of her head. That's a risky move. She just laughs along, feels when the crowd is ready for more story. We can all learn from this. If the crowd wants to laugh big, be flexible enough to let them. The end brilliantly wraps this all up. Eliza returns to her life, Harmon/Campbell style, with the same rule she had in Act 1, now even more sure it is correct.
After all is said and done, the life lesson I've learned is, never talk to the person sitting next to you.
Again, I think this is a masterclass in comedy storytelling. Lots to learn here about how to get through all the rocky and potentially boring stuff you need for a story, while also getting the jokes in when you can. This is exactly the kind of work that I most enjoy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe, and maybe jump on the Patreon if you want to support. I'd love to have you. And if you want to talk about comedy with people who are trying to do it in a constructive way, we also have a Discord channel.